Alright, so here's, I think I'm up to Rev 5 of Mark 3 of the honey pump. So it's all glued up now. I used just some acetone, and I stacked all the pieces up and then dribbled some acetone on them and wiggled them about to get the capillary action, to get the acetone in between all the parts. Some of them I clamped, some of them I had to sort of stack up. The gear in there I threaded onto a mandrel to set. The little fiddly end of pipe bit, I just sort of sat there and gave it a gentle squeeze and then just hands off. And that came together really well. It's nice and solid and goes on and off the end nicely. Happy about that. But this one, you can see it's got this sort of powdery residue on the outside. I think that might just be, if you put the acetone onto laser cut acrylic, it sort of washes off sort of the surface detail a little bit, and then that resolidifies into this sort of white dust. I'm going to have to clean all that up. So over this hole, I'm just going to put another one of these slices once I'm all happy with how it looks. So I'm not 100% happy with how these all bonded up. These ones have got a decent amount of contact area, so I think they've bonded pretty well. I ran a few tests on a few scraps prior to doing this piece. But this part here and this part here up with the last pieces I glued together, and they're not particularly well bonded. Like, they're quite solid. Oop, spoke too soon. Yeah, I was going to say they're quite solid, but I can still see a little bit of flex in there. Like, I can see a tiny crack opening and closing, but clearly I've opened and closed that crack so much that they just came apart. So my plan to resolve this particular issue is I've got a little cup here full of scraps of acetone. Scraps of acrylic that are just slowly dissolving in some acetone. So I'm going to use that as a glue to glue these pieces together that don't have a great amount of surface area. So I think in general terms, when you're gluing two of the cast faces of the acrylic together, that is to say the big flat areas, that works pretty well. They're pretty flat, and the capillary action wicks it in there and it stays in there for long enough to soften both halves and they join together. However, this face here, all the edges of these parts here are all laser cut, so they're not as flat as these. I could sand this down, like lap it down on some wet and dry and get it flatter, but even then it's like freshly cast acrylic is phenomenally flat. So I think I might need some sort of adhesive paste to join these two together properly. I haven't really got to the bottom of the inconsistent quality of the glue up. I think like finger oil might be a factor. I've been trying to avoid touching any of the surfaces that I'm later going to glue. When you got to peel off all the paper, the protective paper on the acrylic. It's quite hard to do, so I can't rule out the possibility that I've got the occasional fingerprint and the bond is poor where those fingerprints are, but I'm not 100% sure. In any case, once my little acrylic scraps all soften up, I'm going to go around and sort of paint those everywhere to make sure everything is honeyproof. But yeah, all in all, pretty happy with how this is going. Don't like this stack up build system. Much prefer 3D printing. There's a lot less fiddling around, a lot less careful jigging and arranging and peeling off of paper and gluing up different parts and so on. I couldn't print this all in one go given the geometry, but I could definitely print that part as a unit, and this part I could print like that with minimal support, and that gear likewise. But it's easier to keep acrylic clean than 3D printed parts, and that's a big factor for anything you're doing that comes into contact with food. It needs to be able to be cleaned pretty thoroughly. So I'm gonna wait for my scraps to soften and then glue these parts together and see how we go. Okay, bye bye.